And the theme of our enrichment Zoomina today is people experiencing homelessness and advocacy. And very happy to have Sister Dororthy Fernandes, who's a presentation sister, and she's based in India. And she's based in one of the very backward states of India, actually, Bihar, and in the capital city, Patna. And she's been there for for about 25 years, as she'll share with you. And out of those 20 years, she's been working with people experiencing homelessness and advocating on their behalf. So she'll share a little bit more about her story when she gets the opportunity. We also have with us Cormac Mc Art, and Cormac is the director of an Edmund Rice ministry in Belfast, and he's at the Westcourt Centre. He's also a member of the ERI board, and he'll also share his story of how, what led him to start advocating for people experiencing homelessness and sleeping rough in Belfast. And I now I'll now stop sharing so that I can just spotlight Dororthy. Okay, and then I'll also spotlight Terry. All right, and I'll spotlight Cormac. All right, but before I hand over to Terry, sorry, I spotlighted you by mistake, Brian. Okay. Okay. Before I hand over to Terry to lead us through this presentation with Cormac and Dororthy, I just want to run a poll. Okay, so I'll just start the poll. It's a simple poll, and 4 questions, and I invite you to respond to them. Let's see what the response from our participants are today. So I give you about 2 minutes to do that. It shouldn't take you too long. Okay, we're still waiting for the first response. Okay, I have no idea why there are no responses. Okay, but that's fine. Okay, I'll just end the poll over there. And we'll carry on. Okay. So, Terry, over to you.
So welcome everyone, and welcome Dorothy and Cormac. And I'm going to ask Dorothy, any response from you as regards the poll?
There were no responses to that, Terry.
Okay.
All right. So I say move on now to the question.
Okay. Thank you for that. So we're going to get a presentation from Cormac and a presentation from Dorothy. And we're going to start with Cormac. So Cormac, I'm going to put a question to you. When we observe homelessness on our streets or in our neighborhoods, in our cities, around the world, both in developing and developed countries, it seems to be not just a huge issue, but also unsolvable. So tell us your story, how you got involved, how you worked at the issue, how it is involved in especially, how you got involved especially in the area of advocacy. So over to you, Cormac. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. And thanks everyone for the opportunity to share our story and experience. I'm going to go through a PowerPoint presentation as I'm talking about our journey here. And I know there may seem to be quite a number of slides, but I'm going to go through them very quickly, and I'm happy to share the presentation with everyone afterwards. So I suppose from a personal level, what motivated me in terms of trying to engage with the issue of homelessness and to advocate for people impacted by homelessness. And when I was thinking about it after I received the invitation from ERI, I think there are two main things on a personal level that resonate with me. And the first was my family, my mother and my uncle and aunt visited London for the first time, I think in the late 80s, 1980s. And when they came back, they were shocked at what they had seen. This was the time when you saw the development of what became known as Cardboard City. So there were certain areas in central London where many people were sleeping in cardboard boxes, many homeless people sleeping rough. This was the first time that they'd ever seen anything like that, and it really struck them. And that's what they talked about when they came back from London was these young people sleeping on the street. My mother especially, because she said that she saw young people who were the same age as me and my brother, both teenagers at the time. So that always kind of resonated with me, I think, as part of my growing up as a teenager. And then the second thing was in 2007, I was privileged to be invited by the Christian Brothers to go to Zambia and to Lusaka for an immersion experience. And I think really there, it was where I saw the charism of Edmund Rice in action. We worked with the Novitiate Brothers in Lusaka and saw the stuff that they were doing with street children, with general issues of poverty in and around the city. And it really made me think when I came back, what can I do? This whole notion of thinking globally and acting locally. So when I came back, and to put it within the context of the Edmund Rice story, when Edmund looked out of the window, what did he see? When I came back and looked out of the window, this is what I saw. So right next to our building, this is the perimeter of our car park. These are our railings, was a drop-in shelter and a homeless shelter for men recovering from alcohol and drug addiction. So I didn't have to go too far to try and find a calling for our centre. We were an old school building in Belfast city centre. It closed as a school, and the brothers had opened it for different projects, working with people in need. We still had children on site during the day, so I couldn't really do anything until the evenings. So I reached out to the Morning Star House Hostel, which was the building next to us. Took a bit of a risk. I knew nothing about homelessness. Reached out to them and asked them, was there anything we could do to help the men that were in that situation? So the hostel was divided into two. Half was the wet side, who are men who were still using drugs and alcohol, and the other was a dry side, men trying to recover. So we reached out to the men on the dry side, and we started to bring them into the centre for night classes. We talked to some retired teachers from the Edmund Rice Network, and they volunteered their time, and we began to hold classes for men that were homeless. From that, we got to develop an understanding of the issue, some of the reasons as to why the men became homeless. We built up a rapport and a relationship both with the men and the service, and it really got us thinking as to what can we do? What can we do using the resources we have at hand? And advocacy was an easy area for us to get involved in. We were providing education during the week, and then we wanted to branch out into advocacy. So we had both the 2 feet in terms of a charity stroke service approach, and then a justice stroke advocacy approach. So that's where we saw this going. I was fortunate then to attend the training with the brothers in Geneva with ERI. So I got a much better understanding of advocacy myself, and I was able then to apply it to the work that we were doing on the ground. So one of the men from the hostel was interested in learning about photography. So we put on a photography course. Then we asked, look, why not use photography as a way of highlighting the issue of homelessness? At that point around the city, you didn't see too many people sleeping rough. It's very different now. But back then we had to go with the men who were homeless in the evening, and they showed us the sites where people were sleeping rough. So we went, we asked them to take photographs of this and to bring it to the attention of the public. They did, and in 2010, we put on a photographic exhibition in a gallery space in the city centre. This was very successful in terms of visitor numbers, I think over 500 people within a few days, but also in terms of media attention. We attracted print media, online media, some of the TV channels. RTE, which is the Irish channel, did a lovely short documentary on the exhibition and the issue of homelessness in Belfast. And it really showed us that this area of advocacy could work. So we tried to develop this then. As I said, we worked primarily with homelessness. Soon enough, we learned that this also related to issues of mental health, addiction, and wider issues of poverty. So we were learning as we went along. We tried to learn about the systems, the structures, the relative legislation, who was responsible for helping people who found themselves in this situation. And then we tried to develop advocacy opportunities around that. Okay, so we developed a shared approach of service and advocacy. And then this is how we developed that. So we engaged with schools, local homeless services, national agencies, and the United Nations via ERI. Okay. So in terms of what programs we developed, we work in schools, largely the Edmund Rice schools that are connected to us. We develop a social justice action plan for schools, which encourages them to do something around the issue of homelessness, to organize activities, events, to raise awareness, to become familiar with what legislation's in place, who's responsible for helping people who are homeless, and trying to create generally well-rounded young people with a social conscience and sort of education of the heart, you know, in terms of the charism of the Edmund Rice network. So practical things like writing to their MLAs, MPs, emailing them, asking them what they're doing about the situation, talking to family and friends, holding assemblies for their year group or the whole school, same around art, poster displays, social media campaigns. So we would visit the school and give them an overview of how serious the issue is here and ask them what can they do to help. And I want to share one particular example in terms of outcomes of that. So we spoke to one of the primary schools based in Belfast, and particularly a class of 10 and 11-year-olds. We presented our talk on homelessness, and then we left them with the challenge, what can you do? So they literally acted upon it. They invited a local city councillor into their classroom. He then invited them to the Belfast City Council for a meeting of the entire city council chamber, which was the first time that had been done in history. So the young people went along and they gave a presentation on the current homelessness situation. As I said, picked up by the media, BBC, some of the local newspapers. This is one from the Irish News. So it got a lot of attention, which in itself gave a lot of attention to the issue. And the outcomes were that the city council agreed to light up the building. This is the main building in the city centre, to mark homeless awareness. So the children achieved that, but they also achieved a pledge from the city council to allocate resources to fund a study to identify all vacant properties around the city belonging to the council that may be used to help alleviate homelessness. So this was a very practical and a very successful outcome, but this happened just before COVID, and then everything was put on hold. But in terms of what someone can do in response to a crisis or a situation, this is a perfect example. 10 and 11-year-old children were able to achieve this in a matter of weeks. So I found that personally very inspiring. At a local level then, we engage with people who are homeless through local homeless services. We've went way beyond working with just the Morning Star. We work with different hostels and shelters and homeless services throughout the city. In doing that, we develop advocacy projects and initiatives. And in doing so, we try to identify opportunities and platforms for homeless voices to be heard. So we go in and work with people, we get to know their stories, and then we develop opportunities for them to share their stories and to have their voices heard at the local level. We tie in with an event every year in the first week of December, which is called Homelessness Awareness Week. And then we arrange a whole program of activities ourselves and with our partners, again, with a focus on highlighting the issue, but giving a voice to people directly impacted. Okay, so in collaboration with homeless men and women, we have produced the following. We've produced 8 photographic exhibitions. Photography is a very powerful medium for sharing a story by visualizing an image in a situation. We've produced 8 of those. We've produced 2 short films. We've produced a street art mural project, and we've also produced a book and a publication which combines photographs with case studies and real life stories. Okay, and these are available to view on our website. You can see the address at the bottom, www.stillsomebody.org. So please feel free to have a look at some of those. You can download most of them. Here's just some examples. This is a poster. This is one of the photographs for one of our exhibitions. This is the cover of the book we did, Word on the Street. This is our street mural project, which we deliberately painted on a wall directly opposite the Human Rights Commission in Belfast City Centre so that they could see it every day, and it was highlighting the issue for them. Again, this attracted a lot of media attention. Then at national level, I've been fortunate as a result of the work that we've been doing over the years. We started doing this 2008. I was invited to be a board member of what's called Homeless Connect, and that's the national umbrella organization for all the homeless services. So again, this gives me an opportunity to feed directly into this sectoral body the experiences and the voices of the people that we're working with on the ground. And then very, very recently, I was invited as an advisor to help lead what's called a lived experience program. And that's part of the National Homelessness Strategy in Northern Ireland, 2022 to 2027, whereby we're asking people who are experiencing homelessness to talk directly to local government to help design and develop policy and practice. So that's a really important outcome. So it's giving people with lived experience of homelessness who are homeless or have been homeless recently, a mechanism to lead and talk directly to local government and the housing authorities. And just to highlight that, one young woman we worked with recently has spoke at Parliament when we had a government up and running here about the issues of how the private rented sector and landlords treat homeless people. She shared her experience. They were being treated very badly. The houses that they were being put into was unsuitable. They were losing deposits. They were being treated very unkindly. And this led to the government actually introducing a landlord's registration scheme. So a great outcome in terms of someone who was homeless, having their voice heard to help other people who were homeless. And this is just a photograph of our camera club. Our most recent exhibition was on display in Stormont, which is the Parliament buildings in Belfast, so that the government could see it every day. Again, each image has a story behind it. It's linked to someone who is homeless, so their message was getting across at the highest level of government. Just a creative way of advocating around an issue. Then the third level that I mentioned was our work with ERI, and since 2015-16, we've been working very closely with ERI. We've submitted a number of reports, oral reports, written papers through the UK UPR process, through the Special Rapporteur, through Human Rights Council. And I'm going to show you an example of how we've empowered people who are homeless to actually engage with these mechanisms later on. So it's just a third level of our work around advocacy. As part of this, I was invited last August and September as a panel of 1 of 8 people to address all of the permanent missions in advance of the UK UPR review. So I was the only charity there. I was a small charity. The other panel speakers were national human rights organizations. So I was quite privileged, and I had a 5-minute slot to give an overview of the homelessness situation here and really show how difficult the situation has become. But it was a privileged opportunity. And again, that came from our work with ERI and our work in at the UN level. Okay. So in terms of the impact of our work overall, it has really allowed us to develop our knowledge of what advocacy is. It's given us a greater knowledge of the issue in terms of the reasons why people become homeless, the impact it can have, the scale and the scope of it. It has allowed us to identify platforms for people to be heard at local, national and international level. And it has allowed us to link directly with key stakeholders, both at local, national and now international level, For example, the all-party group on homelessness is made up of politicians from each party in the north, and they meet every quarter. We're invited to attend those meetings in Parliament. Again, we can feed directly as to what's happening on the ground. The Northern Ireland Housing Executive is the local housing authority. Our most recent photographic exhibition is now on display in their premises, in their boardroom, and the chairperson has asked for the photograph we took, which represented child homelessness, be framed and put on her desk so she can work towards alleviating that every day. So those are just sort of small outcomes that have been a result of the work that we've done around advocacy. Most recently, the Children's Commissioner for Children and Young People here in Northern Ireland produced a report for the first time on the levels of child and family homelessness here. And they asked us to include some of the photographs we've taken in the report. They asked us to come along and speak at the launch of the report, which again gave us a new audience, but also was a sort of a validation of the work that we do. We also work with all of the major homeless charities and NGOs now. One of them is called the Simon Community. They were impressed with our most recent exhibition. They've invited us to do a collaborative project with us. They're a big charity. They have a lot of resources, and they're going to display some of their advertising campaigns on billboards. So for us, that's a great outcome. Some of the people we work with in the hostel, we teach them the basics of photography, encourage them to take photographs to show their situation, and there's a chance it'll be on a billboard around the city centre. You know, in terms of helping someone's self-esteem and level of feeling of worth, that's a really important outcome for us. So this is a photograph just advertising our most recent exhibition. We opened it in February in a gallery space in Belfast City Centre. Since then, it's been on display in 14 different locations: Belfast, Derry, Dublin and Cork, so right throughout the north and south of Ireland, giving us a huge audience. Like I say, it encaptures the experiences of people who are homeless, and it also touches upon a lot of the complexities of homeless, a lot of the reasons as to why people become homeless, and the impacts. Over the past number of years, we've seen more and more deaths on the streets of Belfast of people who are sleeping rough, and the photographic exhibition covers all of that. So it's hard hitting, and it's giving us a wide audience. And in terms of media coverage, we've been on the nightly news twice, BBC World Service website, the Irish News, which is a local newspaper, Belfast Telegraph, local newspaper, the View Digital, Belfast Media Group, Belfast Live, which they have all large online presences. So it's been very successful in terms of reaching an audience. I'd say we've reached thousands of people already, and it's still ongoing at the present. So that's a really important project for us in giving a voice. The photographs were taken by people who are homeless, or they were taken based on the stories of people who are homeless. But it's just a creative way of highlighting the issue, and it's what we could do within our resources, and it's proved very successful. So that's me. I'm going to finish up, and I'll take any more questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Cormac, for that very extensive and showing the complexity of the issues in a developed city. And I'm sure people around the world can appreciate what you're saying.
Just in response to Paul's question, Paul, the situation has become really bad here, but I think in a way that inspires us to keep going. It's more important than ever that we do keep going. For instance, the main category of homeless presenters here now is no longer single people, but it's families. And that's a really worrying situation. There's 44,500 people who are currently on the social housing waiting list. Over almost 26,000 people here now, households are deemed legally homeless, which is almost 3.5% of all households in Northern Ireland are now homeless. So it's more imperative than ever that we continue to raise awareness and shine a light on it wherever we can.
And thanks, Eduardo, for sharing about the Brothers Project in Bolivia with the children living on the street.
Tino, can I come in on
Yes.
that question? Reasons for homeless from Sister Felicia. Yes, Sister, we only came across the drug and alcohol issue because we were working specifically with a hostel for men in recovery. But the issues are so broad at present. The cost of living crisis, marital breakdown, paramilitary intimidation, gambling disorder, drug and alcohol issues, mental health, There are so many reasons, and what we try and do is show that this can happen to anyone, and it's about someone's circumstances. So a wide range of reasons that for homelessness. Another one being that there's just not enough social housing. We have 45,000 people needing social homes, and the government are currently building around 800 social homes a year. So it's going to take around 50 years at present to meet the current need. So along with the cost of living, it's a very serious situation. But the big challenge for us is that it's not visible. We only see in Belfast maybe 40, 50 people sleeping rough. But the much bigger problem is behind the scenes, and people don't see that. And that's why it's a challenge for us in terms of advocacy.
Yeah, thanks, Cormac. So back to you, Terry, now.
So are you closing the chat now, Tino?
I am, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, Cormac. And now I'm going to hand over to Sister Dorothy, and I'm going to ask Sister Dorothy also, you know, the idea of the observation of homelessness in a poor state of India, where there are huge populations, and how she came to be involved in that, and how she developed her level of advocacy in that area, in a developing state country and a poor state of Bihar and in the city of Patna. So over to you, Dorothy. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry.
Over to you now. Yeah, that's perfect.
So I was basically an educationist, and I moved out of school, formal school, and some of the realities of people living under the open sky, under plastic sheets, was something that disturbed me as I walked the streets of Patna. So who are these homeless people, and where do we find them? Do we interact with them? Do they matter to us? The homeless people are the unprotected citizens of any city, and they are often the unseen and unheard people. They are the ones who serve us with the sweat of their brow, and then we throw them away, because we believe that the city belongs to only a handful of well-to-do people. But these unprotected citizens are domestic helpers. They're rickshaw pullers, they are vendors, they are sweepers, they are garbage collectors, they work on construction sites, they are cleaners, small business people along the footpath. And these homeless people are the city makers. It is they who make the city, they who maintain the city, but unfortunately, they have no right to the city. They serve us attentively, but we never stop to think about them. We never relate to them. We avail of their services, and we don't even think whether they have a dignified life of living. So some of these pictures are pictures of people in Patna, where they live, homeless, elderly, unprotected, with no social security, no housing, no basic services for them. And what are some of their work? These are the construction workers who work on construction sites. So we meet with them, listen to their stories, educate them about what can happen if they are registered with the government of Bihar in the Labor Department. We organize workshops, especially on May Day, to honor the workers. And intervals of 4 months, we also gather them together so that they listen to one another's stories and know what's happening to them. So where do these homeless people live? These are the kind of settlements where I work and where people live, just along the roadside here, with a plastic sheet over their head, some of them in the open sky. This particular community lives under the bridge, open to and being very vulnerable during all seasons of the years. These are more pictures of settlements, people living along the canal, the drain, always pushed to the periphery, always pushed out of the city. But yet they have to come to the city and they have to make the city. But they have no right to live in the city. And this is a constant battle that is going on between the bureaucrats and the government and the people who are homeless. Because basically Bihar is a feudalistic state and caste plays a very important role in the lives of the people. So all these scenes, all these interactions, all these meetings with the people really disturbed me, and I said, I need to respond. But I was alone. So basically, I had to look for people. Being a non-Bihari, I needed to get people from Bihar who would understand what I wanted to do. So we began by educating young people, men and women, belonging to all faith groups, young and old, because there's a wisdom of the old and there's a learning for the new. So invested a lot of time in educating. And why was the education important? Because fortunately in 2000, I began work with the homeless in 2003. And 2005, there was a scheme from the government of India. It was called the Jawaharlal Nehru Renewal Urban Mission to enhance the city. And 65 cities in India were identified to give housing for the urban poor. And in Bihar, Patna, the capital of Bihar, and Bodh Gaya, the tourist center, were chosen to have the housing done. So we began to study this scheme and began to say what it would imply. So we went to the communities, gathered them together in their own settlements, talked to them about what is possible. Then we had a practice of bringing representatives from each settlement, at least 2 every month, where we would gather and share with them information and ask them what they wanted. So there were construction workers, there were vendors, there were people from the settlements, all who are making the city. And the responses that we got from them were so powerful that once they knew this is something that they can get, they were ready to be part of this journey. So how do we make this real? Even though there was a scheme of the government, the constitutional provision was there, which mandates the government to guarantee rights to the people. And the right to shelter also forms adequate standard of living in Article 11 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. So this was one kind of a weapon or an understanding which we began to tease out, began to share with the people, began to tell them what are the possibilities and ask them whether they wanted something. And the response was, yes, we will do it, we will do it. So this education went on, and then to our good fortune, there was a court judgment by the Delhi High Court, by the Chief Justice of the Delhi High Court on the day of his retirement, way back in 2010. And he said, it was a landmark judgment which he gave, and he said the people living in the juggies means huts, are not to be treated as secondary citizens and are entitled to no less to basic survival needs as any other citizen. And it further went on to say in many other judgments that even if the people don't have an address, an electric pole is enough to give the address to the people. So this became a very important tool for us to advocate on behalf of our people and to say that they have a right to housing, because India has also been a signatory. So over the period of time, with all the education sessions we had, we began to say that while we sat in protest sit-ins and protest rallies, We were only doing it within the framework of the Constitution of India, which gives us a right to protest, our democratic right to protest in a non-violent manner. So our people with motivation were taken into confidence, and we said we will take to the streets, because we were trying to meet and trying to talk, but to the government, and nothing was happening. So you see some pictures here where we got into a lot of conflictual situations with the law enforcing agencies, because though it's a constitutional right to protest peacefully, the government was not allowing us to come in the big groups to meet them, because unfortunately our chief minister was not giving us an audience. So the only way we could approach was to demonstrate on the streets and gather together and get ministers. This picture shows a minister present with us to come and sit with us in the sit-in rallies. But then over the period of time, eviction began to take place. And it was heartbreaking, because the symbol of the bulldozer was being used to destroy the houses of the people. The houses were made only of bamboo and grass, and it doesn't need a bulldozer. So often when we reached and when the people came to destroy, we asked them, where is the order? How can you demolish? Because there is a provision in the Supreme Court of India, no eviction without rehabilitation. So when we began to ask these questions, the law enforcing agencies, the bureaucrats, the government got very angry and upset with us. But we did not stop. We continued asking these questions, and our people also began to ask questions. They resisted. This particular lady was very, very vocal, and she even slept in front of the bulldozer and said, if you want to destroy, you have to let the bulldozer go over me. So eviction and demolition without rehabilitation. So these are some of the scenes, and this bulldozer became a symbol of destruction, and the people were fearful because they would come unannounced. They will just use a bulldozer to destroy the, and people are left without anything, just with what they are wearing. The children's books are destroyed, food is destroyed, their little belongings are even sometimes smashed beyond any recognition. So this was a situation with what was happening. So we thought we could not stop, and our advocacy work to our good, this is Nitish Kumar, who is the Chief Minister of Bihar for the past 18 years. And when he took over as the Chief Minister in 2005, that was the first time when I said to him, this is a project for us. It was a 7-year project from 2005 to 12, and you have to respond to it. There were other ex-Chief Minister, the Minister for Urban and Housing Department, the Deputy CM, the Commissioner of the Patna Municipal Corporation, the Zonal Minister, the Minister for Food and Security. So we approached all these people, asking them that this is what you need to do, because this is what the government of India has asked us to do. So then they began saying, okay, they gave this agency to this person, a nodal agency to build the houses. So we met the director of the nodal agency and we asked him. And he said, okay, the government has asked me to prepare the detailed project report. When the project report was prepared, it was presented to the government. The government said he refused to give the non-objection certificate to construct the houses. So that really angered us. And we said, we took up this again with more demonstrations, with the local MLA, with the MP. So while we protested on the streets, we ensured that our voices would reach in the assembly and the parliament. So we would frame questions and give it to the MLAs and the MPs so that they could raise their voice. And they told us, you demonstrate and we will take up the issue at parliament and in the assembly. So this has been a struggle of insensitivity of the government. So we work with the Urban and Housing Department. We work with the Patna Municipal Corporation. We work with the government of the Labor Department. We work with the Social Welfare Scheme and the Ministry for Food and Security. Because all these departments are related to the life of the urban poor, who I call the city makers. So the journey has been long. We are still struggling, and the schemes went on from the Jundrum to Rajiv Gandhi, and now the new scheme is a housing by the government, by the Prime Minister, which was supposed to be completed in 2022. So we have been monitoring all these schemes and monitoring. When things were not happening, we even filed 2-3 cases in the High Court of Patna. And we've called the government and the ministry to accountability as to why the houses are not being built and why are people living in dehumanized situations. So in addition to our work with advocacy, we also have the 2 feet approach. We began learning centers for the children who are going rag picking. We had a lot of work to do with the parents because the parents wanted them to go and collect and then to get money for the family. So we said, okay, they can do that, but first they must come to school at least for 2 hours, giving them a taste for education. We also looked at the young girls and the young women in the settlements who had nothing to do. So we began sewing centers for them. We encouraged them to save money so that at the end of the year, you would be able to put at least half the amount and give them a certificate and a sewing machine. So every year we turn out something like 120 young women, out of which at least 40% of them begin their own businesses and they're economically empowered. In addition to this services, we also link them with all the government schemes, with the Labor Department and the social service schemes. So that has in one way enhanced the life of the community in the settlements. The children are all going to school. Once they finish their high school, they are stuck because they cannot go. They don't have the kind of money to take on professional training. So that is what we grapple with. But in the context of the life of the people, it has become better for them. So in order to work with the homeless community, our team, I felt that we as a team need to experience what homelessness is. So on a Saturday night, after 8 o'clock in the evening, we would go out to the streets of Patna, find people sleeping along the pavements under the open sky. And eventually we would go to the railway station where we would find these young children getting addicted to all kinds of drugs. And then after we interacted, we would sleep on the platform till it was early dawn so that we would know what it is to be without a home. And this experience of experiencing homelessness has been a very positive impact on our team, who are very committed to the issue of the homeless. And we still do that occasionally now. So one of the issues that I've been involved in is to setting up shelters for the homeless. So during our night out visits, when we used to see this, we were disturbed again. What can we do? So we began to negotiate with the Patna Municipal Commissioner, and we asked him to give us land for 3 months, and we would put up shelters like this with bamboo and with straw so that it keep them warm. So, but then we thought this is not our responsibility. The onus should fall on the government. So we began to ask for shelters for the homeless. And then after a couple of years, maybe for the past 5 years or 6 years now, we have begun to construct temporary shelters in the winter months for the homeless. And there's been a great improvement. So there are about, this year we were able to set. Now, I would like to end on a positive note now. The new principal secretary, I met him only last week. And he said, sister, I know about your work. And I'm going to find land to construct houses for the homeless. and I need your support and your guidance. And I also found the funds for it. So on that positive note of something positive going to happen for our people, that we continue keeping the struggle going, there is a ray of hope. And so in conclusion, I would like to say, those who possess a vision of life must beckon to go one pace beyond. Thank you.
So thank you, Dorothy, for that very extensive coverage of all the challenges you face in Patna and in the state of Bihar, and how you've engaged with all the government agencies and the law. So thank you very much for that. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to move back now to Cormac and ask him just to share with us one impact story that's really positive. So thank you, Cormac.
Thanks, Terry. Next, we're going to see a short clip. It's one of the men we've been working with since October in a recovery hostel. He has an ongoing struggle with mental health issues and alcohol addiction. But he quite recently agreed to present to the Special Rapporteur at Housing at the UN. And this was a wonderful outcome for us from our project in terms of empowerment. Someone who in January and February wouldn't do any press coverage or wouldn't share his story with anyone. But as a result of the project, the outcomes of our photographic exhibition, his self-confidence and his feeling of worth is really, it's limitless now, and we're really so pleased. And this is his statement to the Special Rapporteur on Housing, which happened in March. And then we're also going to see the Special Rapporteur on Housing refers directly back to Eddie's statement. So we're very privileged to have experienced this outcome.
Video, the distinguished representative for a joint statement by Vivat International and Edmund Rice International Limited.
Mr. President, the UK Government is failing to effectively address the needs of people experiencing homelessness in Northern Ireland and their right to adequate housing. Housing is a basic human right, but Northern Ireland is in the midst of a housing and homelessness crisis. On the 31st of December 2022, there were over 44,500 applicants on the social housing waiting list. Almost 24,500 households on the social housing waiting list have homelessness status. That's more than 3% of all households living in Northern Ireland today. On May the 1st, 2022, 8,500 people were living in temporary accommodation. In some cases, people are waiting for more than 5 years to get a permanent home. Families were the highest category of homelessness acceptances in 2021-22. Almost 3,500 families were accepted as homeless. Between July 2021 and June 2022, nearly 6,700 children were accepted as homeless. As someone with lived experience of rough sleeping and the traumatic impact of homelessness to my personal well-being, I believe that everyone needs and deserves a permanent home. Vivat International and Edmund Rice International recommends that the government significantly increases the supply of safe, secure and affordable housing for all in Northern Ireland, including the private rental sector, and work across government departments to focus on homelessness prevention rather than homelessness management. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanking again all of you for your very sincere and constructive engagement. Let me also briefly point out that my next report to the General Assembly is actually going to be on the topic of affordability, a topic of great interest for not just emerging economies and poor countries, for example, countries that have a large number of informal settlements, but also rich countries, as we heard from the submission of Vivat International and such other NGOs. A very large number of people remain unhoused and suffer from lack of adequate housing in rich countries. And the current ongoing multiple intersecting crises, which are, the climate crisis along with security and other crises, have actually made it extremely challenging for countries to address the question of affordability, and I hope and expect that there will be more constructive engagement on this issue. We have issued a call last week, and I sincerely thank you for considering the responses to the call.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So thank you for that, Cormac. a fantastic achievement on your part. Well done. Sister Dorothy, any further issue on a positive outcome that you'd like to stress from your initiatives? Thank you.
Yes, because of this work with the government and the bureaucracy, the Supreme Court of India has asked the government to constitute committees in each state for homelessness. And the government of Bihar has asked me to be on that committee. So we meet every month and we look at the whole situation of homelessness and address this. So for me, that is one positive aspect of doing advocacy with the government and calling them to accountability for the policies that they implement and they don't realize it. They make policies, but they don't realize it. The second aspect is that the struggle for housing, which are initiated, and in the process, women and men joined, they have become empowered today. And though it has been near to 20 years that we are going on with this struggle, but there is still the commitment and empowerment of the women who say now it is their issue. So I play a background role now, and they have taken this as their issue. And they are together, and they said, even we will work and we will fight for our housing till the day we die. Because if we don't get it, at least our children will have a better future. So I would like to end on those two positive notes.
Thank you, Sister Dorothy, and thank you, Cormac. So I've been asked also just to relate also to what Cormac and Sister Dorothy have shared with you. I come from South Africa, from Cape Town, and we've got both of the issues that Cormac and Sister Dorothy spoke about. We've got in-migration from the rural areas and from countries very north of us. So there's not adequate housing. So they erect shacks, they invade land, or they erect shacks on government land. We call them informal settlements. And eventually they get something about electricity, something about a shared pump with water and ablution facilities. But you cannot evict them. The law of the land says you've got to provide alternative housing if you want to get rid of those shacks. If it's on a private land, they even got onto a railway line and they're struggling to do that. There's not enough housing or social housing available. And then you've got the issues that Cormac is speaking about in the center of Cape Town, where there are 10 cities and people are living in tent shelters all over the place with drug addiction, alcohol problems, etc., that have caused them to live on the streets. Very, very complex. The brothers had a little house that we shared. I was there for 8 years, where we opened up and shared our accommodation with street women and migrant workers. And we shared our whole home for about 15 people. We ate with them, we shared our accommodation with them. And it's a very, very complex issue, how you move them on. And NGOs have said it takes about 9 years before rehabilitation takes place, before people can come off the streets and integrate into society. So both issues are very, very complex. And then, of course, the politicians get involved. And there's plenty of land available in the Cape Town area, but the central government won't make it available for social housing. So there are all those big issues. So thank you, Cormac, and thank you, Sister Dorothy. And I'm sure everybody can relate to this in their area of the world, whether it's a developing country or a developed country.
At this stage, I think we've heard quite a lot from our two presenters, okay? And just before we end, I'd like to now actually go back to the team. Okay, so Kevin, Terry, and Brian, I'm just giving you a minute each. I'll start with you, Kevin. All right. Your takeaways.
Yeah, well, I think that one of the common things from Dorothy and from Cormac was that they engaged with people on the ground. Cormac got in contact with the people in the hospital across the road from his centre. Dorothy went out and met the people.
You're muted, Tino.
Say that again, Terry, sorry.
Kevin is muted.
Oh, I can hear Kevin. No, you can't hear him because you have to change your interpretation button at the bottom. Okay. Change that to original audio.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so anyone, all English speakers, please change it to original audio. Right, carry on, Kevin.
Okay, so I was saying that Dorothy and Cormac began by getting in touch with people on the ground. Cormac went to the hostel across the way, and Dorothy went out into the streets and met the people in the various places where they were living in temporary shelter and so on. And then, of course, they moved from there to dealing with the people that have responsibility for providing homes and houses, and they engaged with various organizations to help to do that. That happened in both cases. And I think too that they obviously had to have patience because they've both been at this for a long time. It's gone back 10, 15 or 20 years. So it doesn't happen overnight. So I would commend them for their kind of perseverance and their consistency and the fact that they continue doing it, and there's still more to be done. So well done to Dorothy and to Cormac.
Thanks, Kevin. Over to you, Brian.
Thanks, Tino. Yes, I suppose a couple of things that struck me in both presentations, the empowering of people to speak for themselves, and a first step in that is just to make people aware that they do have rights or that human rights exist. And the other thought that struck me was, you know, there's a further challenge beyond all this. I mean, people have got enough to do with addressing the issue of homelessness, but there's also the underlying causes, and there are many different causes, and there's the challenge of addressing those causes of the problem in the first place. So that was just another thought that occurred to me.
Thanks, Brian. Terry?
Yeah, just my thoughts from both presentations, the empowering of people to take the issues and to give them, make them aware of their rights, etc., but also educating the wider public on the issue, allowing school children to be involved, and also, as Sister Dorothy said, to go and experience homelessness by spending a night on the streets. Very, very incredible that way. My experience of sharing our house in Cape Town with homeless women and their children and migrant workers is how to empower them to move on once they have established themselves. And very often they get comfortable because they had a little room and everything in our house. But when they were established, how to get them to move on, to get on with their lives. That was a very big challenge. They didn't want to move on or whatever. So thank you very much, Cormac and Dorothy.
Thanks, Terry. And before I go to Dorothy and Cormac for their comment, okay, in the chat, I've just put the feedback link, okay, one in English and one in Spanish. So I invite you to kindly click on that feedback link right now. Let it open in your browser and leave it there in the background. And after the session is over, which will be over in a few more minutes, okay, you can go and complete the feedback. Your feedback is always very much appreciated, and it will take you about 2 minutes. Okay, so with that, I hand over now to Cormac. Cormac, for your last comments.
Thanks, Tino. Just thanks to everyone for attending today, and thanks to ERI for the opportunity. Thanks to Dorothy for a really inspirational presentation. We need to go up a level or two, Dorothy, but that's fantastic, amazing work. Congratulations. And it's so important that you keep doing that. For us, really reflecting back on our time over the past 15 years, it was a step into the unknown. And the first thing that I would say to anyone doing this is learn about the system, learn about the structures in your region, learn about the legislation and whose responsibility it is. And that way you can make an informed decision as to what you can do. And I would always promote a rights-based approach because almost all of the countries have signed up to the relevant UN legislation, and you can challenge the government using that framework. The challenge for us is that the issue is still so invisible to so many people here. So we have to keep going. The situation is worsening, but it's not visible. And that's a big challenge for us. And always we talk a lot when we're talking to the government and the NGOs about statistics. And I said this earlier, but behind the statistics are human beings and real lives, and we must never lose sight of that. So thank you.
Thanks, Cormac.
Thanks, Cormac. Okay, and Dorothy, you're the last and the best. Unmute yourself, please, Dorothy. You're,
Okay. So I want to extend a sense of gratitude for creating this platform to raise this issue, which has been very much at the heart of my being, homelessness. And I was very happy to have Cormac as a co-panelist, and learned from you a lot of things of how to take it and make it a big issue. And you have also broken new paths. And I could not believe that in a place like Ireland, especially Northern Ireland, I had the privilege of coming there in 2001 for our chapter, but I didn't think there was homelessness there. I want to thank ERI for this space that you have created and for the awareness that has gone across the globe. And I sincerely want to say that as we move out, to keep our eyes and our hearts open to listen to what is happening and to see what is happening. And we will continue this journey, though no matter how difficult it is, because it does make a difference to some of the people with whom we are engaged in. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
so, thank you, Dorothy. Thank you, Cormac. And thank you, all of you, for joining us today. Okay, without your presence, this Zoomina wouldn't have had the same impact as it has had.